Call this meeting to order. Tonight, we're going to be led in the pledge by Miss Regina Harvey and Miss Kathy McMahon.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to this special called budget meeting tonight. I believe Mr. Sandvik's got several budget amendments that we need to approve, so this time I'll turn it over to Mr. Odom.
And my suggestion is probably the budget documents that you have, there's very few changes since the original document. Is any revenue changed or adjustment, will be there, but we can cover those by simply going by your agenda, because it's going to reference directly to that. I think it'll be about as easy, so if you'd like for me, I'll start with the first one, and we'll
Correct.
work on. The first one is the General Purpose School Fund, 141. This is the budget. The version of the 2014-15 General Purpose School budget still has $306,688,721 in expenditures, and slightly increases revenues of $294,042,718. This leaves a budget shortfall of $12,646,003. The changes were to the certified salary schedule. Some of the steps did not have the $120 minimum step increase. These corrections were made without increasing the total expenditures. Recommend motion to approve the revised 2014-15 general purpose school budget with $306,688,721 in expenditures as presented. And Jeff has, you've got the changes and increases and decreases on this document.
That packet is for this year's amendments.
Okay. Yeah, this is 13, 14, right. We still do not have growth funds from the state. We still do not know where we stand in that. Jeff said sometimes in the past he's gone to the commission budget approval next to the last day of the month and just get it as he walks in the door or something like that. So until the state gets ready to do that, they actually said through we could send any student changes or enrollment changes or ADM things through the 15th, which is Sunday night. So we wouldn't expect them to calculate until sometime after the 15th anyway. So that's kind of where we are.
So moved. Got a motion by Mr. Blair and a second by Mr. Young. Any further discussion on this?
Is there an estimate of the growth funds in the $294 million figure?
Yes, $1.6 million, I believe.
Would you classify that as a conservative estimate or a practical estimate?
Practical.
Okay. I wish it was conservative.
And if it was 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking at 4, 5, and 6 million.
Right.
Did come out today, I don't know whether you saw it or not, but state released information that their funds for May were still below their projected amounts, which was the business taxes and all again. So that'll probably be in the paper tomorrow, but I saw it released today. So that was the basis for why they reduced down the amount that they would appropriate or place in the state budget for growth funds. So not likely to go back up unless something changes.
Anybody else? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 2.
Number 2 is a differentiated teacher pay salary schedule for 2014-15. That's the long sheet with the colors that you should have in your packet. The salary schedule includes the corrections mentioned above. That was with the budget change. It will be submitted to the state as part of our differentiated alternative pay plan after board approval. For the 2014-15 year, Level 1, Level 2 teachers will receive an experience step as shown on the salary schedule. To approve recommend motion to approve the revised 2014-15 teacher salary schedule as part of the 2014-15 differentiated alternative pay plan. Basically, as we initially brought it to you in March, I guess, as we were attending that, we talked about people in levels 1 and 2 would not advance possibly to the next year experience. Legislature took some action on some other things in that, said not to include TVAS scores in that. Then there's some litigation pending. So I think you could approve it and do it, but my recommendation to you is let's not do anything until we see how the state settles on this. I think it's still up in the air, is how they treat that particular piece, even though when we went to all of our trainings, that's what they were telling us. But you don't have to include that. The other things that you see on the sheet, what Jeff had to do to make sure everybody got at least the $120. So he had to make some adjustments in numbers for that to happen. But anyway, you can see basically through 25 years, the EDS and doctorate, if you remember, that was one of the two things that were being put together. It will take about 2 years, maybe 3 years to probably make all of the changes unless you make some just drastic changes at one time. To come to the new salary type that the state's looking at, to cut back to of course, they said cut back to 15 years, and we stayed at 21, but the old plan had 25 years, if you remember. So there's some adjustments, and they said don't do anything above a master's, but we left in ours, we left in the master's plus 45 and the EDS. The master's plus 45 is going out, but the EDS and the doctorate, combine those two. But again, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to probably balance that out again. But everybody has at least the 120 now, right, Jeff? Talk to them a little bit about the pink ones in there and some of your points in there that you're going to show them.
In that new lane, the EDS or EDD for new employees, the pink cells, when I was sitting in our meeting looking, I realized some of those steps were a few dollars higher than our current EDS. And that happened in our initial drafts. We were compressing years 21 through 25. So if you had 22 years of experience, you would go to what our old 25-year step was. When we were trying to take out all raises other than step raises, I felt it was most consistent to undo that compression. And those 3 cells I had to change.
The other thing, you also see two doctors categories and all. Remember, last fall when we did this, if they had already started the doctoral program, and it has to be completed by August 2016, we would grandfather them into the old plan.
We have about 50 employees that met the criteria and submitted that documentation to me, so we'll be watching them over the next 2 years.
So your third column there would be for new ones, and the farther to the right would be the ones that are grandfathered at this time under that old plan. Any other questions? That's what we.
You already made the motion.
I did read it, did I? If I don't, I'll read it again to make sure. Recommend motion to approve the revised 2014-15 teacher salary schedule as part of the 2014-15 differentiated alternative pay plan.
Now,
One of y'all make a motion? Mr. Knuckles? Okay, got a second?
I'll second.
Got a second by Mr. Young. Further discussion. Mr. Holliday?
Mr. Irvin, did you say that your recommendation was for us to do nothing? Or is this the record? Because there was some point where you said, I really think we ought to do nothing so that we don't.
The ones and twos.
The ones and twos.
The ones and twos. That we not take any action. You remember, we had to submit, you approved a plan.
Right.
Again, early March or April, because we had to have it in that deadline.
Right.
And the state board acted on it and approved it, you know, basically. So we received that back. All of this time, then the legislature continued to meet, other issues and things came up. So they're asking us to basically resubmit the final plan this month before
Okay.
July 1 starts. So our recommendation is to hold the 1 and 2 till we see exactly what happens as far as the litigation, the other things that's going on state level.
All right, that's where I got off track, was
Right.
what are you asking us to hold on and what are you asking us to act on? So I understand that.
So what you're asking us to hold on doesn't impact this motion?
No, it does not at all. That, we would not, if a teacher did not get a 3 or 5, remember, they would not gain a year's experience. We're saying that we stay as we've been doing for, I don't know how many years now, that we continue to give the step raises based on experience without regard to whether it's a 1 or a 2, because of the controversy surrounding the TVOS connection with it at this time.
Anybody else? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 3.
Number 3 is your centralized cafeteria fund, and you have a sheet on that one. This would be the one with the kind of blue across the top, one sheet. This 2013-14 cafeteria fund budget amendment reduces budgeted revenue by $1,037,441 and reduces budget expenditures by the same amount. When the 2013-14 budget was approved the past year, we still didn't have the final federal reimbursement rates. Recommended motion to amend the 2013-14 centralized cafeteria fund by reducing revenues by $1,037,441 and by reducing expenditures by the same $1,037,441 as presented. And we run into this every year until the federal government releases their reimbursement amounts. Commodity amounts change all year. I mean, you at this time of year, the one that just presenting you that you approve with the cafeteria fund is assuming you get this X dollars worth of commodities, that the reimbursement's going to be this amount. And so it's an estimate, but remember that fund stands alone. You know, and as long as we keep it solvent, it pays for itself. So this is adjustments to adjust for those changes in revenue,
Here it is.
commodities, amounts, that sort of thing. And you can see where the adjustments are made on this sheet.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Eakes and a second by Mr. Jernigan. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Jernigan.
I know it's an estimate. But what are we anticipating for this coming year? You're shaking your head.
We do not know. There is legislation in Congress to make changes. So we don't know.
Well, how did, I heard on the news this morning that Metro, I think it was Metro.
Yeah.
Gonna feed everyone free, so.
Let me explain that to you. About maybe 2 years ago or 3, the federal government came out with that you could do this if you can make it work. The issue is this: Metro is 75% free. So they believe that with 75% qualifying free, your reimbursement is a little bit higher for the free meals than certainly your reduced or your regular pay. There's some supplement to regular pay, like in your milk, which always, plus commodities that come in, there's a dollar and cents figures attached to that. But they think with the 75% that they can cover the cost for everybody. So that's the move that they're making. Westboro City considered that too, you know. The reality of our issue is that we only are about 27% totally free. Now, you have reduced in there, which is, adds to it, so we're about 43 to 44% total free and reduced. But your big figure is the one is what percentage you have that's free. Mr. Blair, in his calculations and looking at it, he said he thinks you'd have to be at least 47% free or something for it to be financially sound. In other words, if you did that, you'd have to take money out of the GPS budget to make it happen in Rutherford County right now. So obviously our suggestion is we stay with the program that we currently have.
Well, I would certainly not recommend anything that would, in the cafeteria fund, that would take money from the general purpose school fund. I don't, and there are certain items in the lunch program that carries a greater percentage of refund than others, I know. But it's just odd that, and I know our explanation, but anytime you see numbers with parentheses around them, it means that you're going to have to look at, and I hope Mr. Blair looks at this
Yes.
very closely.
Yes.
Year after year and makes adjustments as needed to keep that from being the rule of thumb.
Absolutely.
It certainly needs to be the exception to the operation, I think.
Well, we said that we very well likely will have to maybe have some increase in the meal price in another year. And we've been, how many years have we been at this
I
price
think
now?
3 years ago we
Something like
increased
that.
it.
So it would not surprise me if the price, the part that we have to buy in the commodities. Obviously, you've been to the grocery store, you know what we're talking about, that's increasing, so. But I find it interesting here, like the estimate and why you're off so much. If you look in that first section up there, there was an increase of $85,791 in fresh fruit and vegetables. You remember, as the year rolled on, if you're watching the news, the USDA was saying that they wanted schools to use more fresh fruits and vegetables, so they obviously followed through with some additional funding for you to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables. So that's what's so difficult about the federal lunch program is it's fluid. And whatever USDA or Congress does, that changes your numbers. And that's why you have to carry, what is the minimum?
The maximum is 3 months of operating expenditures. So we may go under that this year, but we've stayed over it these other years. Once we close out June, we'll have an idea.
But that 3 months, that's been kind of the standard for years.
Yes, sir, it has.
May I make a request that whenever we're talking about the food service director, that we use his full name so no one confuses.
I was wondering who it was.
Mr. Fred Blair.
Thank you, especially when they're talking about raising the meal prices. I certainly want his name mentioned in full context.
I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
What else? Well, we got the motion by Mr. Eakes and seconded by Mr. Jernigan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We're on the next page.
Yeah, I think number 4 and all is your cleanup amendments, which are typical at the end of any school year, that we'll have to take to the commission with line item changes for the 2013-14. So this is the GPS Fund 141 for 2013-14 amendments, and these are the amendments that we need to make. This amendment allocates $40,500 in already budgeted staff funds and $5,864 in related benefits to the line items affected by staff changes. These changes cover the nursing position that had to be added mid-year, training for our new attendance coordinator. We added, when we brought him in while Mr. Mays was still here, we did 2 weeks, so let him come on in and start and do some of that. The new high school principal In the case of Blackman, we asked to bring her in a couple of weeks before Ms. Vick leaves, you know, to do that, so. And summer clerical help for human resources. 3 weeks on that, human resources. So, recommended motion to amend $40,500 in already budgeted staff funds and $5,864 in related benefits for a total of $46,364 to the staff and benefits line items as presented.
So moved. Got a motion by Mr. Blair and a second by Mr. Eads. Any further discussion on this? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 2.
Number 2 is we continue with our cleanup now. We go to some other line items. And remember, within this, they're category line item adjustments, plus and minus, but not function level changes. If you know what I'm talking about at this. So we have no increases. It's just moving dollars around within that function. For example, sometimes you have a little extra budgeted in natural gas, but you need it in electricity or something like that. And that's what you're going to see in this as you adjust those things. So this is a routine cleanup amendment that reallocates budgeted non-labor expenditures within the major functions. It totals $1,332,700. The largest functions being affected in this case is $498,500 in plant operations, and that's the utility changes. $171,062 in maintenance. This is various repairs and replacements. And if you look at your sheet that's got the breakdown on that, that's things like that $32,000 boiler we had to put in, some changes like that that occur during the year. $145,000 in technologies, which is computers and networking. And again, some years we'll have to spend more for cabling, and some years you can buy more devices. They came in this year when we got some of that $2 million that's now been expended from the governor's one-time monies, we had more monies come in for cabling, so we were able to divert some from the original budget to some other areas. And then $118,077 for transportation. This is special education, basically a lot of this, and this is from the Genesis Center over here. We had to add a bus for this year to carry more students to our off-site or contract site. $103,556 in vocational education to record expenditures in the proper line items, and $97,870 substitute teachers allocated between certified and non-certified. In tough employment years, we tend to get more certified teachers. And as the economy improves and all, and they can get jobs, then you'll find our vendor hires more non-certified teachers. And they're different line items, so you have to make that adjustment at the end of the year. No difference in your total amount, but you still have to adjust it by category. So since this amendment reallocates already budgeted non-labor expenditures within the major functions, only school board approval is needed. Recommend motion to amend $1,332,700 in already budgeted non-labor expenditures within the major functions as presented.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Jernigan and a second by Mr. Young. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 3.
Number 3 is other expenditures. This amendment changes the coding for 2 expenditures, $750,000 in state. The term is PARC here, but that was a state online testing is what you're talking about here. Funds are being moved to 78810-709 data processing equipment to 71100-722 instruction equipment. When the park funds were approved, we thought more of the expenditure would address system-wide issues. The $25,000 is for the student handbooks, which are being moved to the superintendent's budget from the 72810-399. The handbook is the code of behavior and discipline that has your policies in it, that, you remember, Angel gets printed each year. And that's basically the cost, but he's just moving it to a different category rather than where it's been in the past, because the state makes changes in the categories they want you to use. Makes technical changes, what they are. And the motion is to amend $775,000 in already budgeted park and student handbook expenditures out of function 72-810, central office and other as presented.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Jeremy,
Second.
got a second by Mr. Blair. Any further discussion? Mr. Young?
That's being discussed at the state level. We are printing them now at the State Department of Corrections. So this is about as low of figures you can do it. Again, correct me, is it 78% of our families have internet access and stuff or something?
Pretty close to that number.
It's somewhere in that, about 3/4 of our families. Well, it contains some documents that you want to. We ask the parents typically to go over this with their children, sit down and read it, and then we have a sheet at the end that sign it as you read it together. And it has certain things like, we'll be responsible for the textbooks you're presenting. If you do not return your textbook, you're financially responsible for those textbooks.
It also contains the internet.
Internet permission.
There, that's a requirement by the state. It's a state mandate to have that with all of our children. And we log those. Those have to go through our instructional technology department in order for students to use the technology at the schools as well. So it serves about 6 different purposes legally as well with that binding piece of paper.
Okay, that's a question. Technology advancing like it is.
I would not have a problem with us posting it also electronically.
Posting would be a very nice thing to do.
People lose the
I don't know
books.
how we get
Yeah.
So, it'd be good.
You know, but electronic signature is becoming quite popular. I know, in my industry now, we're doing a lot of that, so.
Anybody else? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Number 4 is the revenue side. This amendment adds a net $2,642,229 in revenues to the 2013-14 GPS budget. It adds $537,923 in expenditures and increases the fund balance by $2,104,306. Most of the revenue adjustments are for local revenues that are in line with the increases seen across the county. $32,096 is for donations and related expenditures, and $70,621 is for the trustees commission. The other increases in expenditures are for utilities, $350,000, a boiler replacement, $32,000, and an additional $32,355 for diesel fuel price adjustment for bus owner-operator per our contract, and $20,851 in Safe Schools grant expenditures. The additional utility funds are to make certain that the major function plant operations does not get overdrawn. So recommend motion to amend a net $2,642,229 in revenues to the 2013-14 GPS budget, an additional $537,923 in expenditures, and increase fund balance by $2,104,306 as presented. Obviously, Jeff has not gotten all the May and June bills yet for utilities and all, so you're looking ahead and trying to see if you need to make any adjustment when that 12th month, doesn't the 12th month all comes in.
Jeff, with the addition here, if I'm reading this correctly, of $350,000 for utilities, do you still feel comfortable in the 14-15 budget with
Oh,
no
no.
increase?
This is just to make certain we don't overdraw. Basically, we have 2 months of utilities hit in June before we cut off and close out our year, since they lag behind a bit. And just in looking at the last couple of years, I wanted to be very cautious because we get a major audit finding if we overdraw the total budget for a function, and I want to avoid that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
It's probably overkill, but I want to be cautious.
And if it's not expended, it goes to ending fund balance.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right,
That's
right.
all right.
It's just a very popular and nice public statement in our budget discussion to be able to say that because of the investment that we've made in the past, that between the 13-14 budget and the 14-15, that we're not increasing utility
Right.
expenditures.
Yeah.
With this increase of 350,000, we may actually be showing a decrease.
Decrease, right.
Okay. But even if we had to put another 300,000 in the 14-15 by moving numbers around, not adding to the budget, we can still confidently say as board members that we're not increasing the utilities budget from
Oh, yeah,
13-14 to 14-15.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It was a cold winter.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
and yet we're not
You get
increasing
Close
utilities
to zero
because.
and under
yeah,
10 degrees, and that's,
right,
you do not budget for that ahead of time, typically
Yeah.
in Rutherford County.
right.
Yeah. And the dollar amount that we've been over since that cold spell, or those cold spells, has been fairly consistent. I just want to be cautious.
I'm sure.
Got a motion by Mr. Young,
Second.
got a second by Mr. Eads. Any further discussion on this? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Let's ask Jeff if he's got anything else. Anything else that you got other than this? You want to, is it okay if he kind of goes over the scenario? If the commission were to change the budget, we have to comply and we'll have to have a special meeting. Why don't you, I'll let you tell
All
them that. They haven't done that very often, but
Yeah. The public hearing is Tuesday at 7, I believe. And then the budget committee will meet Thursday, the same night as our board meeting, to make their final recommendation. And under the private act, we are supposed to be in compliance with their recommendation, I think by June 21st this year. It depends on the setting of the final meeting and all. I don't anticipate any changes, but if that should happen, we would need to have a special call board meeting. I don't think it'll happen. But.
Between their act on the 19th, Thursday, and the 21st.
Well, that wouldn't work, obviously, but we would need to meet the next week.
Okay.
Anybody else got any more questions? Everybody good?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Michaels gave everyone a notice on the meeting changes to the end of the month. And next week we have 2 meetings next week, regular work session and board sessions. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned.